The Chinese regime is using the coronavirus outbreak as a form of propaganda warfare, and how China occupied half of Mongolia. This is China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. As more information comes out about the deadly coronavirus, we are finally getting answers. There's been a lot of questions about where the blame for the virus's spread should lay. Chinese people eating bat soup? A leak from a Chinese biolab? A cover-up at the highest levels of the Chinese Communist Party? No, turns out America's to blame. Chinese social media sites are pushing the idea that the virus really originated in the United States. Clips from Taiwanese TV and mistranslated captions from American reporting are used to back up the case. Like this one, where the Chinese caption says that the CDC confirms the first case of the coronavirus originated in the US. It's not clear whether that translation was state-backed or if it's just a reading comprehension issue by whoever made the Chinese caption. But the Chinese Communist Party is turning the coronavirus outbreak into a big propaganda push. They published this huge, glossy book called A Battle Against Epidemic, China Combating in 2020. It basically compiles all official state media reporting about the coronavirus. And guess what the message is? The Chinese Communist Party, despite all evidence to the contrary, and despite the broad undercurrent of popular anger on Chinese social media, has faced the epidemic with great wisdom and effectiveness from the start. I get it. We all believe we're the hero of our own story, even if we're an authoritarian dictatorship that routinely kills our own citizens. To be clear, I'm not using the royal we here. Anyway, the book has gotten rave reviews in Chinese media, not least because it was published by their ultimate boss, the Central Committee Publicity Department, formerly known as the Propaganda Department. The Chinese regime is also taking the propaganda battle to American social media banned in China, like this poll by state-run Xinhua News. In China's fight against the coronavirus outbreak, which part impresses you most? Gosh, there are so many good choices. It also doesn't help that the World Health Organization is lavishing praise on how the Chinese Communist Party has responded to the outbreak. One WHO official even said this.
If I had COVID-19, I want to be treated in China.
Yes, will it be the box treatment for you, sir? Or the welded in your home to starve treatment? Or perhaps the more plebeian, thrown into a hastily built, overcrowded quarantine center treatment? Meanwhile, the popular WeChat messaging app has been censoring coronavirus content for months. And many citizen journalists and whistleblowers who have spoken out about the coronavirus have been jailed or simply disappeared. But Chinese coronavirus propaganda doesn't always go as planned. State-run media released this video of female medical workers getting their heads shaved. It was supposed to be a, wow, look at how dedicated these women are, shaving their heads so they can fit into their medical gear better. But it came off more as a group of men humiliating a bunch of women in tears. Chinese internet users were furious. One person wrote on WeChat, "Stop using women's bodies as propaganda tools." Don't worry, that person won't be posting comments like that for long. The Chinese Communist Party is also using coronavirus misinformation to attack Shenyun. Shenyun is a New York-based performing arts company. According to its website, its mission is to revive traditional Chinese culture through the arts. It was also started by Falun Gong practitioners. So, the Chinese Communist Party really hates Shenyun. But since it's based in the US, they can't touch it. So, they've started spreading rumors that the dancers are infected with the coronavirus, even though Shenyun performers are the least likely Chinese people to be infected because they're literally banned from traveling to China. The Communist Party's propaganda got so bad that in one American city where Shenyun was performing, the health department had to step in and be like, guys, the dancers are not infected. The Salt Lake County Health Department made it clear that Shenyun is based in NYC, not China. This kind of propaganda attack isn't just happening in the US. In South Korea, where the coronavirus outbreak is really severe, a theater manager received a phone call from a TV reporter who said that the Chinese consulate had told the reporter that Shenyun performers were from Wuhan. That's where the coronavirus outbreak began. But all of the Communist Party's attempts to spread propaganda and lies about the coronavirus are only damaging its reputation, abroad and even inside China. What the party calls rumors are now being taken as truths. Rumor is just a prophecy far ahead of our times, says a quote widely shared online in China in recent weeks. Taiwan is also accusing the Chinese regime of spreading disinformation, calling it cyber war. This week, Taiwan's government reported an increase in fake online reports about the coronavirus on the island and blamed China's internet army for being behind the misinformation. I mean, just because there's an outbreak of a deadly disease doesn't mean you have to stop being petty. And coming up after the break, why does China occupy half of Mongolia? Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. The country of Mongolia. It's famous for horseback riding, yurts, and throat singing. But there's a second Mongolia, Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, which is a province of China. And it's famous for human rights abuses. Well, not so famous for that, actually, and that's part of the problem. Matt Geneza sat down with Engpak Togchog from the Southern Mongolia Human Rights Information Center to learn more.
Thanks for joining me today, Engpak.
You're welcome.
So there are really two Mongolias. There's the country of Mongolia and the Chinese region of Inner Mongolia, or what you call Southern Mongolia.
Correct.
I mean, besides obviously one being a country and one being a province of China, what are the big differences?
Well, historically they were one nation. There is no two Mongolia. It was only starting 1949 when the People's Republic of China was established. Southern Mongolia, also known as Inner Mongolia, was annexed to China. So in history, they are part of the greater Mongolian nation.
Right. I mean, under the Qing dynasty, if you look at maps from the height of the Qing dynasty, which was like 1644 to 1911,
Correct.
Mongolia, the entire Mongolia, was part of China at the time.
Well,
According to the maps, right?
well, according to the map, there is a lot of issue with those maps, and then there's a lot of problem with the terminology that used by many scholars, even in the West. For example, Qing dynasty is not Chinese. Is Manchu's Qing. It's not China's Qing, right? So, well, more precisely, actually, the Qing dynasty is a joint rule of Mongolians and the Manchu over the larger territory, not only including China, but also many other territories, including Mongolia, was a part of Qing. So,
I mean, the Manchus had actually taken over part of Mongolia before they moved into the rest of China.
well, they were, before 1644, Manchus and Mongolians were neighbors, and they had a very good relationship, especially the Manchus with the Southern Mongolia, eastern part of Southern Mongolia, where they had a very close relationship. And so even the founder of Qing dynasty, Norhach himself, claimed himself as a descendant of a Mongolian Khan, Timur Khan. So they at the beginning of the Qing dynasty, it was really, Manchu really considered themselves as a legitimate descendant of Mongolian nation.
So really, China has been part of Mongolia for hundreds of years.
Yes, that was during the the Mongolian Empire. China was just one province of greater Mongolian.
Right, so China's
Empire.
been part of Mongolia since ancient times, right?
Yeah,
That's
well,
the way to phrase it, I think.
But now the Chinese are claiming that Mongolia, not only Mongolia, Tibet, and also Uyghurs were part of China from long time ago, since the few thousand years ago, but which is not true. I mean, the Mongolia actually is a separate nation. If you look at the history between Mongolia and China, right, there's a Great Wall between Mongolia and China.
Right, the Great Wall is sort of at the southern border of what today is the Chinese Inner Mongolia.
Right. So yes, first of all, the term, I would like to say a few words on the terminology that you use, Inner Mongolia. You also use a terminology about Southern Mongolia.
Ne Mungu in
yes, Ne Mungu. The term Inner Mongolia is highly propagandistic, and it's highly Sinocentric terminology. Of a direct translation of the Chinese term called Nemengu. It's implying that this part of Mongolia is integral part of China or inner part of China. So there's a territorial claim with this terminology, and so and then on the other hand, if you look at the history of Mongolia, if you look at the map of Mongolia, so when you say inner, you are standing in Beijing or heartland of China, and then it looks to the Chinese. The Southern Mongolia looks inner, and the Northern Mongolia looks like outer. But if you look at the if you stand in Mongolia and look at the map, then it's inner is actually the independent country of Mongolia should be inner, and Southern Mongolia is outer. And actually, there is a very interesting book published in early 20th century by Danish traveler. His name is Henning Haslund. The book is entitled In Secret Mongolia. There's a very interesting map published in the book showing that Inner Mongolia is independent country of Mongolia. Outer Mongolia is Southern Mongolia. So it's really depend on from whose perspective you look at the map. So, but we traditionally never say ourselves as inner, because there's no reason for us to say inner and outer. We just, the term Southern Mongolia is from the Mongolian word Over-Mongol. All Mongolians still use today Over-Mongol, which means Southern Mongolia, south of Gobi Desert. Northern Mongolia, which is independent country of Mongolia, Outer Mongol. That's it. There's no political meaning whatsoever of inside of which country. This is just geographical terminology, but now used by the Chinese as inner, which is our land, inside of China, outer, which is outside of China. That's why it's a very Sinocentric terminology.
So what's it like nowadays to be ethnically Mongolian living in China's Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, or what you call Southern Mongolia?
Southern Mongolia. So, Southern Mongolia is just like Tibet and East Turkestan is an occupied nation, occupied by the Chinese. It's a Chinese colony. So
happy ethnic minorities?
No, there's like
because state-run media told me that everyone was happy.
No. if you it's like as a second-class citizen, treated as like second-class citizen. We do not have any basic human rights. We do not have any fundamental freedoms, let alone political autonomy. So the people who demanded the autonomy. National autonomy, which was promised by the Chinese Communist Party, were now sent to jail and considered separatist, and their family members are imprisoned. For example, Mr. Hada, who in early 1990s demanded the autonomy, genuine autonomy, and self-determination, which is part of basic human rights.
China calls it the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, so it's therefore one of the least autonomous parts of China, right?
It is the first the so-called autonomous region set up by the communist China. And then they, again, Southern Mongolia was always the guinea pig of Chinese all, ethnic policies, including, like the ethnic autonomy, which was experimented in Southern Mongolia first, and then they realized that this model works. So they used the same model in Tibet and in East Turkestan. So and then when there is every time when there is a political movement, especially toward the ethnic minorities, so-called ethnic minorities, it is experimented in Southern Mongolia. So, for example, during the 1960s and 70s.
Because of Cultural Revolution.
Cultural Revolution. During that period of time, the Chinese government carried out the large-scale genocide in Southern Mongolia. And then at that time, the total population of Southern Mongolia was 1.5 million, and 1/3 of the population was impacted. And then
they killed thousands and thousands of people.
They killed at least 100,000 Mongolians.
100,000
100,000 Mongolians, and then 500,000 were imprisoned, sent to jail, and tortured and maimed. So even Chinese government official statistics support this. 100,000 Mongolians were killed just for being who they are, just for being
basically
Mongolian.
For being their ethnicity.
Yes.
It's interesting because the Communist Party claims to be the party for all races and peoples, and then they're super racist against Mongolians, against Tibetans, against Uyghurs, right? It's just like they go by what's the race of the person, and they persecute these groups.
I like the word the racist you mentioned. Yes, it is. Chinese are the most racist people I have ever seen.
Well, the Chinese Communist Party, let's say.
If you look at the Chinese history, right? So Great Wall is there. It is the earliest evidence of racial segregation in human history. And it is testimony to the history between the Mongolians and the Chinese. So for thousands of years, the racial segregation is never new to the Chinese. If you look at the history, right, the Great Wall was built in 2,000 years ago, and then at that time they already, racially segregate people. They call the people in the north as all barbarians, one word, and then the Tibetans, Mongolians.
I think they were jealous because Mongolians are so good at wrestling.
Well. It's a part of Mongolian, tradition, right? The wrestling and Mongolians not only is really strong people, physically fit, but also it's a very they good at waging wars, and the Mongolians.
The horseback riding.
Yeah,
like
horseback riding. And the Mongolians are warrior people, and not only that, Mongolians are really good at conquering other nations and then administering the other nations. Actually, if you look at the Mongolian history in the 13th century, especially under the Kublai Khan's time, and in that time, Mongolia was actually international nation. It was very diverse, and then the capital of Mongolia had probably just like modern day New York. There's so many.
Pizza.
Yes, everything. All modern ideas. For example, the embassy, the passport, and the postal service.
In the 1200s?
All these religious freedom, world's first religious summit was held in the capital of Mongolia at that time. And then all major religion were freely debating, and then the Mongolia were really open-minded people, and not like the ones that described by the Chinese, and then Mongolians are barbarians, illiterate. No, the Mongolians are very open people, and They had a really amazing issue. At that time...
Was you saying the Chinese Communist Party has been inaccurate in its descriptions, like it's been lying, perhaps?
Well, of course, it's not only inaccurate. There's there's a lot of racial discrimination in describing Mongolian history, portraying Mongolian history.
So, what is the Southern Mongolia Liberation Movement?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Southern Mongolia liberation movement has never stopped, starting the early 20th century when the independent country of Mongolia restored the independence. All part of Southern Mongolia really, joined the movement. And then, 1930s, Southern Mongolia set up their own independent government, military, and then 1945, after the Second World War ended, Mongolia was partitioned into two Mongolia, right? Southern Mongolia became officially part of China, and Northern Mongolia became an independent country.
So the liberation movement or the independence movement, I mean, because you hear about there's the Free Tibet independence movement and there's an East Turkestan independence movement for Uyghurs.
Yes.
And then, so this is similar to those?
Yes, this is, there are not only inside Southern Mongolia, but also outside Southern Mongolia. There have been a number of organizations, movements, still very active.
Well, you're outside of Southern Mongolia, obviously. Yes. Lucky for you, because otherwise you.
Yes, I'm the lucky one. Yes. We are unlucky. We under the Chinese. We were, my people are under the Chinese colonial regime, but personally, I'm lucky. I was able to get out of there and then enjoy freedom here. Yes, there are a number of organizations still very active in fighting for the freedom or independence of Southern Mongolia abroad.
So the Chinese Communist Party would label someone like you a dangerous separatist trying to split up China.
Yes.
Right? So is there another solution that doesn't require independence, a solution where you could have what you want but still be within the People's Republic of China?
Well, this is actually, history tells us that there's no other way to become, free under the Chinese colonial regime. So this is, to the Mongolians, to the Southern Mongolians and Tibetans and Uyghurs, same. It is not really the problem of communism, actually. This is colonialization. It's not communism. It's an issue of colonization.
So the Chinese Communist Party is a colonial hegemon.
Oh yes, of course. So, but the problem is it's not only just the communist problem. We have double problem. One is communism, Chinese Communist Party, of course. The other one is colonization. I mean, this is just so. Even after the Chinese Communist Party regime collapsed, there's still a big question. The Mongolians and Tibetans need to be free. Doesn't matter which regime replaced the communist regime. Our top priority is how to free ourselves from the Chinese colonization, not just fighting the communism.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.